Welcome to the Project Management Operating Room, where we look at real project management problems, diagnose those problems, and offer solutions. This is episode 2. Today we're going to look at 3 cases. The first one is a loss of clinical privileges. This is a project where a client becomes frustrated after some meeting mishaps, and they impose some pretty strict rules on how meetings are going to be scheduled going forward. The second case is what I'm calling boundary violation. This is one where a new project manager feels the team is leveraging AI tools too much and that they should use more traditional tools like voice of customer and affinity diagrams. Case 3 is what I'm calling a failure to chart. This is one where a project manager is frustrated for having to answer and relitigate decisions that they felt were made in a meeting 1 to 2 weeks prior. All right, let's get into case 1. I will read it. I started a new job about 5 months ago and came in with a solid project management background. I've never had issues running client meetings before, but this customer base has been a completely different experience. A few weeks ago, I had a medical emergency and was out with an OOO up. My team was hosting the meeting and the key client stakeholder wasn't going to attend. Instead of reaching out to anyone else on my team, the client only contacted me. My out of office reply was on, so they should have known. The meeting happened without the stakeholder, went poorly, and I got an angry call afterward blaming me. More recently, I was coordinating meetings with a team member who had limited availability. I blocked time on his calendar and sent invites accordingly. I'm in a different time zone and didn't catch that one of the times landed at 8 a.m. for the client. They were upset. I offered to push it to 9 a.m. and they canceled everything. Now all meetings have to be submitted to a specific person for approval with 48 plus hours notice. I send the request, wait for confirmation, then schedule. Even after all that, I'm still getting pushback on who is or isn't included. The issues seem to fall into a few patterns. Scenario 1, not enough people were included on the invite. Sometimes I'm intentionally limiting the audience, or I wasn't sure every person needed to be there, or I expected them to forward it internally. Scenario 2, not enough advance notice. I'll try to get approval from the client, but they often don't respond clearly. The meeting falls through and the timeline takes the hit. Scenario 3, very specific scheduling requirements that I'm expected to know and accommodate at all times, with no flexibility in return. One-off days off, hard stop times, people who only work certain days. But when I ask that we avoid meetings before 11 a.m. Eastern to account for our West Coast team members, that's apparently unreasonable. All right, so what are the problems here, the actual symptoms? So the first one is the client is on edge after multiple scheduling issues. We just heard about both of those scheduling issues. The second one that's causing a lot of pain right now is the PM now has to go through an approval process for meetings. The third one is the client feels the meetings don't include the right people. And finally, the PM feels the client is uncompromising on the schedule of these meetings. All right, so what is causing these problems? So the first one is why is the client on edge after these scheduling issues? So the very root cause of this to me is the failure to properly hand off that first meeting when the PM went out of office. And it's difficult when you have a medical emergency, but it's important when you know that you have a client who has a particular process, particular expectations, and you don't relay the word to them that, hey, I'm going out, so-and-so is covering for me, please contact them if there's any issues with this meeting and needs to be rescheduled. The other thing that would have been ideal to do even before this emergency, or when it happened, if possible, would have been to communicate with the team and say, hey, I know this client, they have so-and-so on their team, they need to be at every meeting. If for some reason they can't make it, cancel the meeting. So those are the 2 things here that are the clear root cause in terms of where this all started. It started with that first meeting. Second problem that we have is the PM now has to go through approval for meetings. The root cause here is that after the second meeting issue with the time zone that we heard about, where the PM had a bit of a mishap where they didn't realize that one of their team members was in a different time zone, and so it put it on for 8 a.m. and the client, that was too early for the client. When that happened, the trust was lost. And that's where we hear now about all these processes and protocols they're putting in place for meetings now. And so that really caused everything that's come after it. The third problem is the client feels the meetings don't include the right people. And the root cause here for me is that the communication has broken down between the project manager and the client. So we don't, there's not clarity on who the right people are and when they're available. That's all up in the air. And so there's just this constant consternation about who should be attending, when they can attend, et cetera, et cetera. Just a total breakdown. The fourth one is the PM feels the client is uncompromising on the schedule. And the root cause for me is that the frustration is now driving this client's behavior. They were frustrated on the first scheduling issue. They got more frustrated on the second scheduling issue. And now it sounds like there's a lot of issues with time and stakeholders being included. And it's all just bubbled up to the point where they're saying you have to follow this process. And if it's not exactly the right way, we're going to be frustrated about it. And it all started from one issue, and it hasn't really been addressed. And so that frustration has just continued to grow and grow and grow. All right, so how do we fix this? So it's always easy to identify the problems. What are the solutions? So I think the first one here is maybe the easiest one to think of, which is this PM has to have a heart-to-heart with the client and take ownership for the past missteps. I think that will, it just seems like there's so much frustration here, and so much of it has just continued to build, that there has to be a heart-to-heart. This PM has to say, hey, I apologize for all the past meeting issues. It's on me. I really want to fix this with you. How can we do this going forward? These are my suggestions. And I'm going to give the rest of the suggestions in a minute, but I think that coming together and kind of falling on the sword, I think that will really help to quell some of their frustration and establishes some ownership and accountability. And it may not be an elixir, but it certainly is the right thing to do to at least try to bring the temperature down. The second solution that I'm offering is establishing a consistent list of stakeholders that will attend each meeting. So, if you want to do a full-blown stakeholder matrix, sure, that's fine. But there needs to be some document that, if they keep saying, hey, you're not inviting the right people, and the PM is saying, well, I'm paring down the list intentionally because this is who I think. Well, one, the client ultimately decides who on their side should be attending the meeting. That's really up to them. So if the PM is paring down participants from the client side, that's a mistake. But in any case, we just need a list. We need a list established of who's going to attend what meeting. And it's really that simple. So rather than going back and forth, let's establish those stakeholders for every meeting and get that in writing and get that shared document out to both sides. The third one is establishing mutual windows of time that will work for both sides. So again, similar to the previous 2 points, is this is a communication issue. So the PM is saying the client is being inflexible. We have a team member on the West Coast. They don't start until 8 a.m. Pacific time, which is 11 a.m. Eastern. The client wants to have the meetings before then. Well, we need to work together on that. If the West Coast team member is critical to the call, the client needs to understand that. If that team member is not critical from the call, then let's try to find a solution. And whether we're recording the calls for them, whatever it is, but we need to find a solution on how to work together here. And I think so those are the things that I would do to solve it. And I just want to clarify here. The PM had framed this as the client is being difficult, and I would say, personally, I work with a lot of clients that have high expectations, and I think they should have high expectations. The part about all these additional regulations that have come in on meetings, that feels a bit over the top, but we don't know if just those 2 missteps were the only 2 missteps that happened. And if they weren't, then some of this is understandable, right? But in any event, we as project managers, we have to be adaptable. We have to navigate these difficult situations. And I think here, when you're dealing with a client that is very engaged, which I love clients that are engaged, and you're dealing with a client that has high expectations, you can't have missteps like these 2 meetings. And that's what happened here. And they lost a lot of trust in the ability of this project manager to schedule meetings that were respectful of their time, and as a result, they enacted these processes that on the surface seem extreme. But we don't know if there were other things that happened that caused them to get to this point. In the like scenario thing, it did sound like there were some things that also happened there that caused some problems as well, as far as lack of trust around inviting the right people and times that would work for both sides. So that's how I would approach this one. And again, not the easiest situation in the world, but when you have these situations, you have to be tight. That is our job as project managers. We have to be super tight on everything that we do. All right, let's move to case 2. So I will read this one. I have a team member who is very much into AI and pretty much runs as much as he can through AI as possible. He also is very adamant about the rest of the team following suit. I get that the tools are very powerful, but I do have concerns about essentially having the group stopping the thinking process due to the assumption that everything can be done with AI. I'm also concerned on having the AI make mistakes on poor judgment. Since these are not math or coding problems, I'm more skeptical about the results. As a relatively new project manager, I feel I might be easily swayed towards the AI path, not having much of a precedent for doing otherwise. But as an adult with 20 plus years professional experience in other fields, including teaching, I still have my doubts about going down this path. One of the biggest knocks against AI in teaching is that students don't even know how to think or remember what they have learned anymore due to the over-reliance on running stuff through ChatGPT or Grok. Even if it takes a little longer, I think a personal and interactive way of working with a team on what should be collaborative tasks like voice of customer capture and affinity diagrams as examples is valuable. It is better for shared understanding and alignment on where the product we are developing needs to go. All right, let's take a look at the problems here. So the first one is the obvious one, is the PM is concerned about the team's AI use. The second one is the PM feels the team should be interacting more. And the third one is the PM feels the team should be using voice of customer and affinity diagrams. So some tools related concerns there. What is causing these concerns? So in the first one, the concern about the team's AI use, I think this comes from a very clear bias that this PM has, which is from teaching and seeing in teaching that they felt that it affected their students in a certain way. And because of that, they have a lot of concerns about the project team following the same way of using AI. The second one is the PM feels the team should be interacting more. And the root cause for this one is, for me, is that the PM is a brand new project manager. They don't have context or experience on how much interaction is and isn't appropriate. So it's hard for me to look at this and say, okay, are these people literally just sitting at their workstations and they have Claude or ChatGPT or Grok up all day and that's all they do? That seems a little bit far-fetched to me. It seems more likely that they're using it to extract whatever data is being done here, and they're just using that to kind of fast track things. I don't know for sure, but that's my assumption. So I'm just not sure that PM with really limited experience, despite having 20 years professional experience, really has enough context to say they need to be interacting more. And then to the third one is the PM feels the team should use voice of customer and affinity diagrams. Root cause here for me is that the PM is just reaching for alternatives. This sounds to me like something they saw in the PMBOK and thought, oh, cool, we should use that. And I don't know, but based on the way that ended on how the product is built, it makes me think this isn't a situation where we're getting just massive amounts of customer feedback data and we're using these kinds of, where it would be appropriate to use voice of customer and affinity diagrams. But the ironic part here is that the way things are right now is when you have these massive data sets, guess what the best way to process them is? It's AI. So if that is the case, if that is what they're doing, then it's hard for me to argue because the AIs are going to spit out the affinity diagrams for you and then you just analyze them. And the interaction part, you can still get in there and do all that, with just diagrams that are generated a little bit differently. So for me, this one feels like we're just reaching for tools because we don't like the tools that the team is using. All right, so how do we fix this situation? So the first thing for me is understanding what the company policy is. And it sounds to me like, based on the fact that one team member is using it and they're encouraging the rest of the team to use it, it sounds like it's within company policy. And assuming that's true, I think the PM just needs to mind their business. it is not up to us as project managers to dictate how work is executed in terms of the tools being used. We certainly have the ability to influence the project tools that we use, but as far as execution side, how a person codes their code, or how the team is, what code repository they're using, that's not up to us. So I think there's just this PM is well intended, and I understand the concern. The concern has validity. Certainly, the AI tools, they get their fair share of things wrong, and the PM is completely justified in that concern. However, we have to trust our team, and we have to trust that the team has the ability to filter out what is and isn't correct from these AI tools. And that's where I think we just need this PM to kind of just stay in their lane a little bit more when it comes to that. Getting into the project management tools, when we talked about voice of customer and affinity diagrams, to me in this case, I think this PM just needs to only suggest tools that will benefit the team. And to me, I think we're kind of, this PM is conflating two things here. Is we have, tools that are executing the work, which sounds like how they're using ChatGPT and Grok or Claude or whatever they're using. And then we have more project side tools that are, affinity diagrams and VOC. And, and maybe not. I don't know. I'm just kind of surmising some of that. But whatever tools that we use, I think we need to really run them through a lens of, is this going to benefit the team? I didn't hear anything that suggested to me that the team is not being productive with the tools that they have. I didn't hear anything about, hey, the velocity is super low, or we're spinning our wheels a lot because we're relying too much on AI. All I heard was, I don't like AI. I saw what it did in teaching. I don't think the team should use it. So, to me, it just feels like, hey, I don't like AI, so I'm going to throw out these other tools, but I don't hear a benefit for using those tools. And then finally, I've alluded to this a little bit, is adapting a mindset that the value comes from serving the team, not mandating that they do certain things. And we touched on that already. I'm not going to get too deep, but again, this is about serving the team, and we're only supposed to find solutions to problems, not create problems. And I feel like in this case, we're creating a problem. Again, context could be different. I don't know, but based on the context that was provided, for me, this feels like we're creating a problem, not solving one. All right, case number 3. So we had a planning call last Thursday, made a clear call on which feature gets cut. Everyone nodded. We moved on. By Tuesday, someone pinged me asking if we had actually decided that or just floated it as an option. I checked the notes, and then in parentheses, they have by Granola, which is an AI note-taking app. They said, quote, discussed scope reduction, end quote, and nothing else. This drives me kind of crazy because it's not that people aren't paying attention. Everyone was there. The problem is who's ever taking the notes is also trying to participate in the meeting, so you get either nothing or a 500-word doc made by AI that nobody goes back to read. And either way, the actual decision just disappears. The part that kills me is the relitigating, not the first conversation. The second one, 2 weeks later, when someone brings it back up because nobody's sure what we landed on. Does anyone have a system that actually survives contact with reality? We've tried rotating note takers, Notion templates, even just a dedicated decisions channel in Slack, which stopped being updated. I really want to build something to fix this, so I'm a bit obsessed with it right now, but genuinely curious on what people are doing. All right, so what are the problems? The first problem is the obvious one, is the decisions are not being understood or remembered. The second one is the note-taking, whether that's by the person in the meeting or by their Granola AI, is ineffective. And the third one is everything they tried prior to the current approach of having the note-taker and the Granola AI, those tools were not effective in the past. So those are the 3 problems. What is causing these problems? So the first one is the decisions are not understood and remembered. And the root cause here is to me, it's very clear that the decisions are not being sufficiently documented. And we heard a lot about that. We heard a lot about, well, people don't want to read the Granola notes. People don't, the note takers can't capture it. And we'll get more into that in a minute, so I don't want to go too deep, but I think it's safe to say that very clearly the decisions are not being documented sufficiently because the team is asking questions about them, right? Next one, note taking is ineffective. And the root cause here is that I think when it comes to the human note takers, I think there's a loss of context on what is important to capture. So, for me, it sounds like in these meetings, there's a lot of discussion around what if we do this feature and what if we do that feature? What if we cut this feature? You don't need to capture all of that. But what you should capture is, hey, we decided to cut our chatbot feature because the scope is too large for right now. That needs to be noted 100%. And those kinds of decisions, they need to be noted. And there's lots of ways to do that. We'll get into that more. But for me, there's just a potential loss of context because you have the Granola AI playing backup essentially. But those note takers, if you're relying on them and you don't want to read the 500 word notes, which is a different issue entirely, then that's your solution. Just get those critical things written down. The last one was the tools tried in the past are not effective. And the root cause here is the tools are only effective if you use them properly. And we saw perfect evidence of that, right? Which is we have this Slack channel for decisions, but nobody updates it. Well, there you go. So, garbage in, garbage out. Nobody's putting it in, not getting anything out of it. All right, so how do we fix this? The first one is I think this project manager needs to take full ownership of documenting these decisions in a decision log. So you can do this a number of different ways, but ultimately there's one decision log, whether that's restarting the Slack channel that we heard was essentially just gone dark, or creating a decision log, linking it out to everyone, making sure you update it regularly every time a decision is made, ideally on like a Wikipedia type format, and get that out to everyone. That's absolutely critical. So, rather than relying on Granola, relying on other people, you can still use Granola, but you have to have a decision log that everybody can see. The second one here is every meeting should end with a recap of the decisions that were made. And what I would do in this exact situation is not only would I recap those decisions, but I would bring my screen up, I would share that decision log, and I would put them right in the decision. And on that decision, it would say this was made by whoever it was, all the team members that were present, the date and time that it was made, and any notes, like why it was made. It doesn't have to be verbose, but just like one sentence. This was made because the scope was too big. Done. And everybody can see it. And that will stop a lot of these questions. And, I shouldn't say it'll stop the questions, but it will give this PM the ability to say, yes, we decided it. Here's the decision log, and here's what we decided and when. And that's it. And then the third solution for me is don't reinvent new tools. Just use them more effectively. So this person ended their post by saying, oh, I want to build something that will solve all of our problems. Well, you don't need to build a new tool. You have the tools, right? So we heard about using this Granola tool. Well, nobody wants to read it, right? Because it's 500 words, it's too much. Well, even right now, if you didn't do any of these two things that I said and you just looked at what you had, you can very easily go into Granola, extract those decisions. And I'll be fair, I haven't used Granola, but I know with Copilot and really everything else, you can do this. All Microsoft tools I know can absolutely do this within Teams. So there's no reason why you can't just extract the decisions from that chat log, the AI generated log of the meeting, and put those in a decision log. So you already have the tools. You just have to use it. So that's how I would solve this case. So for today, we looked at three cases. All were really, interesting and different in a lot of ways. And, I hope that some of the approach was helpful. It's not your, textbook approach. There are tools that I mentioned, but for me, it's really trying to be completely focused on how we help the team. And I think, in a bunch of these cases, it's really hard when you're deep in the weeds and you're feeling a lot of pressure and you want to do well and you want to do the best that you can. And in all three of these cases, I genuinely believe all these people, just by posting, alone, that shows that you care. It shows that you want to do well in your job and you want to serve the team and you want to serve your clients. And that's awesome. That's exactly right. I mean, think about the number of people who are in these situations who are just, kind of sitting on their hands, like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. These people all ask for help. And, again, it's hard to ask for help, and even these folks who admitted, hey, I made a mistake here, I made a mistake there, all the credit in the world to them for making those mistakes. But I think, in the end here, we just, really need to try to take a step back. And it's really hard, like I said, when you're in the weeds and you're so deep into it, but really try to look objectively at it and say, okay, well, if my friend was telling me about this project, how would I solve it? And that's essentially what I've done here today is look at these with and again, I don't have all the context, I don't have the context of what was provided, but it's really trying to be just very pragmatic, looking at what is going to work best for the team and going from there. And sure, I have knowledge of all these tools and what's written in the Scrum Guide and what's written in the PMBOK, but in the real world, those are just blips on the radar when it comes to tools that you can use. It's about real world experience and applying things through a singular lens of helping the team. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening and watching. Have a great day.